God of War Ragnarok has the most epic looking cutscenes, and I'm here to talk about them. But let's backtrack a bit. God of War Ragnarok released a bit over a month ago, and man has it blown everything up. Sales records broken, people's minds blown. It's everywhere. And of course, that's because it's the ending of the story. Who could blame them? God of War Ragnarok is one of the most ambitious projects in gaming history, and unlike most, Santa Monica Studio actually deliver on their promises. And man, did they deliver on this one. Boy, oh boy, was this an epic game. Just that freaking upgrade, man. Story scope, much bigger. Character scope, much bigger. Combat, so much more awesome. More combos and variety in style. You get the Blaze of Chaos from the beginning, and there's so much to do with them. More characters all around in the story, more plot to the narrative. It did a lot of things right. Maybe by losing some of what made the previous game special in the first place, but the transition is so worth it. A lot of people have talked about everything gamey good about this game, and there was a lot of talk about the story, but in my video I want to focus on these damn cutscenes. Man, they are so glorious. From the opening shot, it is immediately shown that this game is not messing around with its storytelling. You can tell that they want to change the landscape of what you can actually do from a story perspective in gaming right off the bat. And so I want to dissect all of it. So let's go. In this video, I'm mainly going to be looking at a few different things that elevate God of War's cutscenes. Mainly point of views, and I'll touch on that later. As well as character performances, and also how these scenes compare to that of other video games, and even the previous God of War game. Now, before anything, let me give you the rundown of what this game is actually about. But first, maybe you should like this video. It would help out the channel and me. No one loses, right? And yes, there will be some spoilers for the game in this. I'm not gonna go that deep into detailed spoilers. They're gonna be more mild, but they are there, so don't go getting mad at me if anything gets ruined for you. So, God of War Ragnarok kicks off a few years after the events of God of War 4. Boy is back.
Boy, this way, boy. Slow down, boy. 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 Inside, boy. Boy. Beneath the floor. Boy. Boy.
Except he's called Loki now. The kid is grown and is now looking for answers. He wants to know more about his powers, his ancestry, and his destiny, while Kratos is struggling so hard to protect his son and shield him from the horrors of everything. But Ragnarok is upon us, and he can't keep this up forever. So, hesitantly, Kratos sets out on missions to help his boy get answers. Kinda distract him a bit also, and maybe get some answers himself. And so, they meet Tyr, Freya, get back with Brock and Sindri, meet our baby Odin, and Thor, Sif and Thrud, Heimdall, Freyr, the elves, the dwarves, the Vanir. So many different characters. It's honestly the main reason why I've been compelled to make a video on this game more than the previous one. Also because it's the one that just came out and has the better cutscenes, but yeah. So nobody wants war except Boy, who thinks that it's their only answer or something. Blah blah blah, things happen. A lot of moving pieces and a lot of story. But, in the middle of all that, cutscenes. Cool ass looking cutscenes. And one of the main reasons I found them so good is because of the sheer number of characters. Seeing scenes like these where our mains are meeting Thor for the first time. My god, you gotta love the way they introduce Thor in the game with such weight. There's an incredible intimidation factor. You can feel his size and godliness. The way he just enters the room slowly, and we just witness how much bigger he actually is than Kratos. As he moves in closer and closer, it's terrifying. And then slowly over the rest of the game, his character gets more broken down and humanized. This is one of the earliest scenes in the game, but it's fucking fantastic. There's another scene that I found that on its own is even more impactful than this one, I feel. Even though it's much simpler in concept. It's a bit later in the game, but still pretty early, where our main characters are sitting at the table and eating food. It's just a dinner scene. Compared to the crazily epic badass cutscenes where Thor is going nuts or something, this one is pretty low-key. Get it? Low-key? Funny, right? Sorry. The scene feels built upon from a previous simpler dinner scene where they're mainly just eating and talking. Tyr talking about how his cooking is great and mentioning that he'll cook for them sometime and all that, and Brock seeming distrustful. Then this scene comes. We see Kratos sitting down at the table first, with Mimir, like the leading man he always seems to be. Then the camera moves on to Tyr, setting the giant pot down unhinged. But there Sindri's cleanliness comes out and he stops him to put a coaster under it. Brock sets the fire stick on the table carelessly, but Sindri immediately panics, takes it off and cleans around. Brock goes to smell what's inside Tyr's pot, a callback to the scene they had before. Brock is still distrustful, as is his usual character, but Tyr's more relaxed. peaceful, laid back. Tyr sets a plate for Brock and lets him sit down, and of course Brock tastes the food and loves it, but he doesn't make it very apparent. In 45 seconds here, we learned a lot, and were shown so much by 3 supporting characters, going back and forth between them in such a fluid way. But the scene doesn't stop there. Tyr sets a plate for Boy, and he makes a comment that Kratos doesn't like, but Boy is unappeased. He likes it, and goes on to start testing his father. But Kratos remains there, sitting, angry, still belittling his son as any father would. They get into a little argument that makes them both angry. Boy throws down his plate and leaves the room while the camera is still on him. That's what I'm trying to say here. POVs. The camera angles the game always uses simple elements, focusing on the right character at the right moment. In the beginning, the camera is at Kratos sitting down, a simple gesture. Then it pans to Tyr, back on Sindri putting the coaster down. Then to Brock being careless, back on Sindri cleaning up. Then Brock being distrustful, Tyr proud of Boy, Kratos getting mad, and then the focus moves to Boy, who this scene is mainly about. The conflict between him and his father and how it eventually leads to him leaving the room. Because his father still views him as a child. In Kratos' own words,
"My son." And nothing more.
The camera is always going back and forth on the most important character in the scene at the right moment. If you ever watched this show Succession, you'll see a bit of that, where it feels like the cameraman is his own character, finding where the importance is going on in a scene and focusing on that. That's really the most important point in this video. Contrast that with multiple different scenes from even some of the greatest story-based games cutscenes and you'll see a major difference. Like Uncharted 4 for example. Most of its cutscenes are visually stunning, character performances are great, but yes, sometimes it feels like the camera movement is boring compared to God of War. Great lighting, great performances, fantastic visuals, but it lacks this element. Same thing if you look at Red Dead Redemption 2. The performances are great, but in this case I feel like the shots are even more boring, just cutting from one thing to another, which isn't really the best way to go about telling the story, more that it is easiest. And which is fantastic, by the way. I'm not trying to bash any of these games. Red Dead Redemption 2 is still my favorite game of all time. But it still lacks this directorial element that I feel is definitely less present in video games than it is in movies. Even the best of gaming offers little of it. Point of views using camera angles, and a lot of tracking shots and surprisingly, shaky cam. Even in normal scenes. It works, man. That's how God of War is trying to change the landscape. The 2018 game did it a bit as well, but without working with character as well as in this one, which is where I feel like Ragnarok really shines. Another point I would like to touch on here is character performances. And this is another very important point. Not really as unique because this isn't the first game that has given us some fantastic performances, but still, in some ways, God of War Ragnarok elevates them. The first thing they did is put their money where their mouth is, and focus more heavily on character expression and subtlety in emotions, using technology. I've talked about this in a previous video, but in short, little hints of expression sometimes can provoke a lot more emotion than the loudest of crazies, and they're a rarity to find in video games. I mean, I can't blame them, it's pretty hard to render this stuff well, but God of War Ragnarok puts a big heavy emphasis on that and helps to push the boundaries of what gaming can offer in story. If you look at Kratos himself especially, just the vast amount of variety and nuance in his expression compared to the previous game. Yeah, that has partly to do with him more opening up and being less stoic, but still, he offers much more in terms of performance for the audience. Let's take a look at this scene where Boy is coming back from somewhere after being missing for a couple of days. Naturally, Kratos is furious, and, crazily enough, terrified. You can see him being bitter and mad, then feeling clueless and fearsome for his child, at last brushing him off and acting as if he doesn't need protection when his son offers it. It's the little expressions on his face that showcase all these emotions, from anger to fear. That's not to mention the expression we can see in this specific scene as well from Boy himself. He has an insane improvement over the previous game. But that's not it. What makes all the cutscenes so great is that God of War Ragnarok doesn't let a character go under the radar. They give Brock his moment to shine when he finds out the truth about what Sindri did. They give Sindri his moment in his fear and anxiety, Freya with her anguish and lust for vengeance, Thor being depressed, Odin desperate to find meaning, and Boy wanting answers. All the characters get their moment. This is not a game of Kratos, plus some side characters. This is the 9 realms, and we are at war. Everybody is important. It's one of the great things about the game, but also something that some people might find detrimental. In that, unlike the previous game where it was a simple story about a father and a son trying to get to the highest peak to spread his wife's ashes, this one is much more grandiose in its premise, which is about the literal end of the world. But I like it. Anyways, there you go. A couple of points about why I find these cutscenes from this game to be so great. I loved God of War Ragnarok, and I wish and hope that video game stories and performances can always be on this level. We get the few gems every now and then, which I guess makes them more special when they come, but I want more of this. Anyway, this is what I wanted to talk about. I hope this video has been insightful in some way, or you got something out of it. If you did, maybe you'd like to watch this video next I made about The Last of Us. And that's all I've got for you today. See ya.